Can you take your seats, please, for the last session? I thought we were going to move this lectern back to the centre for filming. Were we going to, just checking, I thought we were going to move this back to the centre so Minister Tolley's in good balance. No? Who's going to do it? Anyway, while they're thinking about that, is someone rushing down now to do it? Were they going to move this back to the centre? Can we just pull it? To spend a couple of minutes just summarising or summing up what I thought I heard. And now what I thought I heard and what the officials thought they heard might be slightly different. But I'm going to tell you what I thought I heard. And then I'm going to invite Minister Tolley to conclude the day and finish off. And we've got to be out of here at 5 to 5 on that bus up for a hosting by ministers of some sausage rolls and orange juice. One of the first things I heard, interesting enough, as I walked around the working groups was this kind of refrain of a shift in attitude. And it's not necessarily a shift in attitude of one party or the other, but a shift in attitude of the language of violence. And I know that's a contradiction in terms in itself, but it's to find positive ways to express the solutions and the resolutions of some of the challenges that you faced. Rather than focusing on sending people to prison, why not focus on how are we going to keep them from going there? So it's a very simple attitude which I heard on quite a number of occasions through the day. There's that old chestnut of bottom-up direction. That is, too often you obviously feel that governments are directing downwards, and the also standard or mantra that I've heard quite frequently, one size doesn't fit all. And I think these are kind of reflective of where you come from in general terms. There's no doubt that one of the conversation that needs to be continued and had with ministers and CEOs of the Crown on agencies that are responsible for the area of family violence is how you better improve the relationship, the partnership arrangements, and all the things that go with that. And one of the things I do have done over the last 20, 30 years is to facilitate difficult situations. And I found the best strategy for that was a cup of tea with people. And it's quite amazing what happens when you have a cup of tea. Power balances even out, because there's only one way you can hold a cup, and it's with your fingers. So you're pretty much even in power. There's only one place you can, well, there are a number of other places you can put your tea, but by and large, simple mechanisms do help foster the relationship. And there is no doubt with the significant challenges that ministers face and that you face in the sector and the agencies face, there has to be tighter, better communications. As I said this morning, we've come too far not to go a little bit further, and we've invested too much in this not to invest a little more. There's conversations around workplace, competencies, around people involved in the sector, around capability, and around this issue that was raised by Eugene, I think, and someone else, around, and we saw recently with Ngāpari Nui from Taranaki, by having a record and therefore being barred from working in this area, when in fact, in many ways, people like Eugene and others in Ngāpari would be probably excellent models to put into the system. Equally, again, there's another contradiction in terms in the way that society sees that and the way that that's reflected in the regulations or the law. Investments, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but one of the syndicates talked about what I call innovative investments. That is to take it outside the linear approach that we currently do there, investing in particular programs, but looking wider and looking at the investments that the government makes in education and in health, that we tie these things together. I think, from my understanding of what the government is doing, that kind of bringing together of the resources of the state to deal with these issues is reflected in the fact of the two ministers sitting here right now. There's that the strong view, which I think it's not foreign to you, sustainable funding, and the other part to it, which is funding to succeed. That is, don't put up policies unless you're going to properly fund them, and otherwise they won't work. So that's what I heard from you. By the way, you can. I'll give you my email before you leave, and you can email me any comments on them. But don't ask me up in Parliament when I'm having an orange juice, please. Data collection. I think data collection, as I said this morning, one of the issues. Well, actually, I didn't hear it today. Is the use of the technologies to resolve some of the challenges around data. And I would commend for you to go and have a look, or if you don't know, go and ask your grandchildren or your children about the Internet of Everything. And that is really, in the next 5 to 10 years, government's already doing it. It is the collection of trillions of bits of data and bumping it in and sorting it out. And Len Cook can probably give a long lecture of it. So data collection, which will help inform policy and make the decisions that governments make and officials make evidence-based. Diversity was a common theme right throughout the day, and many examples were given of that. Not only diversity, Māori Pākehā, but also diversity about invisible populations which don't necessarily have a high profile in these kinds of hui. The older folks, which we've seen some examples of that in the recent times, of the treatment and abuse of older citizens. And I think that's something which came out as well. The active bystander, that is, many of us see what is going on, and some of us do something about it, many of us don't. And I think it's a kind of attitudinal shift that's required to shift the mindset of us New Zealanders to actually do something about the violence that we see and do something about it. Because if we see it and we ignore it, then in a sense we're culpable for the outcomes of whatever happens. And no amount of moralising that you couldn't do anything because you were, whatever reason you might have, that's not a good enough excuse, which means that you have to have the means to be able to report, find a way of getting the information to the appropriate people to do something about it. Language definition, be clear about the language. Be clear that when we're talking about family violence, we're all talking about the same thing. Because if we're talking about different things, then we're going to be thinking about the application of it in a different way. So that's a language issue. A couple of other things here about gender, and I think the gentleman who sat in the front here and talked about that was I think, a very useful reminder that family violence is while classically we have a classic thought of in our minds, is across a wide range of members of the whānau. And finally, you need to be careful about the use of these doors, by the way, because they're quickly becoming a metaphor for the kind of challenges that you're engaged in. I've heard several times, no door is wrong door. Someone's got opens if the door can't open, and I've heard a lot of metaphors about doors, which reminds me of that 10 cars up the drive stuff. And I don't think that's a very good metaphor, frankly. And, well, I'm giving you my view. But try and fix the doors up, please. And finally, a question earlier in the day about information. Truly, our kids and our mokopunas are fantastic, you know. I can't get my thing going, you know, that little thing about that big. So I have to ring one of my mokopunas and they tell me over the phone, Koro, move your finger down to the bottom right-hand side. You got it there? Yes, moko? 7-year-old. Now, pehi te pātene. Yes, you got that, Koro? Yes. And then they move me around. I could have done it myself, actually, but give them a bit of a thrill. I want to conclude by saying that's my duty for the day, and I pass to the Minister to conclude the conference. I'll be up at the drinks for a little while, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to go talk to the panels that you saw today, and I'm sure that they'll be wanting to engage with you. It's been a good day. It's been, for me personally, a very stimulating day. It's put kiko or flesh around many of the notions that I've instinctively known or theoretically known, but because I've come amongst professionals and practitioners like yourselves, I'll go away from today learning a hell of a lot more than you probably have. Nō reira, ka te te wā māku nei nei, tēnā koutou, and I'll ask the Minister to conclude the conference.
Ina mana, ina reo, e te iwi o te motu, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, katoa. I'm very conscious of the fact that I am now standing between you, your sausage rolls, and your glass of orange juice. But can I start by thanking Sir Wira for his, well, I was going to say for your very warm introduction, but you didn't. You just said, now, you know, get up and talk. So can I thank you very much for your chairing of the day and your leadership throughout it. I have to say I would love to have been here for the whole of the day, as I'm sure my colleague would be. Unfortunately, I had to appear in front of the Select Committee for 2 ministries and had a question in the House. So, you know, have you had a good day? Yeah? Have you had a good day? Do you feel you've achieved something? Yeah? Great. Can I acknowledge my parliamentary colleague, Amy Adams? It's been an absolute delight to have, well, no, I can't say it's a delight to have been working on family violence, really. But it's been great to have a colleague that recognises that actually one agency can't do this on its own. We're never going to arrest or jail our way out of family violence. And that's been a large message that's come through today, I'm sure. So it's been great to work with Amy, who brings a clarity of vision that probably her law training brings. Can I also thank our 4 keynote speakers, Grania, whom I know well, as the Chief Executive of the new Ministry for Vulnerable Children, Oranga Tamariki. Mari Tukukino, I don't know Mari, where is she? There we are. I enjoyed your little korero before, from Te Puni Kokiri, thank you. Shane, of course, I saw you over the back there. Know Shane well as the chair of the Social Workers Registration Board, but also with a lot more hats, and you were here with those today. And Sue Hobbs, the consultant and coordinator at Keeping Safe, Feeling Safe. Thank you very much to those 4 people for sharing their thoughts on how we can prevent family violence and reduce the harm, of course, that it causes throughout our diverse communities. And can I thank you all for taking part in the summit. It's fantastic that so many of you have given up a day to come and share your thoughts and experiences with us. You know, you are the people that fully understand the real and the very devastating impact that family violence has on our women, on our children, and on our men, coming together to achieve change. Because as we've heard so many people in the short time I've been here say, it's going to take all of us if we are going to make a change. Whether you're a social worker, a volunteer, a parent, or even an MP, we all have a role to play in reducing family violence so that all people in this wonderful country can live our lives free from fear. I'll never forget as Minister of Corrections going up to Arahata for the first time, and the I don't know whether they call them a prison manager. Anyway, she took me through and she said to me, Do you know, for over 70% of the women, when I lock the door, when they get locked in their cells at night, for over 70% of them, it's the first time in many, many years they've gone to bed feeling safe. Incredible when you think about that you have to go to prison to actually feel safe. So when it comes to responding to family violence, our system, as you have probably said today, has been fragmented based on multiple agencies delivering a wide range of services and interventions. And that leads to unnecessary duplication, more importantly gaps, and inconsistencies in both the type and the quality of help that is available to people. The consequence of this isn't simply inefficiencies. It can often be a matter of life and death. So that's why we have to work together to make sure, I'm sorry, but my speech says no wrong door. When people reach out for help. Last time. Most of you were here this morning and Minister Adams was talking about some of the work that the government is doing to develop that more effective and integrated system. From our legislative overhaul to the integrated safety response pilot, we are making significant changes that will keep victims safe and give them the support that they need. And that will help perpetrators change their behaviour so that they too can live a life free from violence. And these changes are absolutely crucial if people are to live in healthy and happy communities. And they're crucial if our children are to grow up in safe, stable and loving homes. And you'll recognise, those of you that have been working with the new child legislation that is going through the House at the moment, that's a core phrase from Helen's Bible from the Expert Advisory Panel, that every child in New Zealand is entitled to live and grow and develop in a safe, stable and loving home. And when I talk about it, I say preferably their own, because that's what they all want. And we know that 57% of the families who come to the attention of our 2 integrated service response pilots include children or young people. And the violence that these young, vulnerable children experience often changes the course of their lives for the worse. And I have had, for the last 2 years, a panel of young people who have either experienced care or who are still in care. They've contributed to the review of Child, Youth and Family, and now they're contributing to the design of the Ministry for Vulnerable Children, Oranga Tamariki. And their stories about their early lives that involve violence, that even they can talk about now as how it affected their lives and how they went on to perpetrate violence themselves as young people. They tell me it increases their risk for future victimisation, their risk of suicide, their risk of mental health problems, and their risk of disengagement from school. It means they're more likely to have poor education and employment outcomes. And it means that they are more likely to grow up into adults who go on to abuse their own families. And that's not okay. So this government has taken and continues to take a number of steps to protect our most vulnerable. In 2014, we made sweeping changes through the Vulnerable Children's Act, changes which better protect children from abuse and neglect and improve their well-being so that they can thrive, achieve and belong. And I was listening to Bill, when you were talking about how everyone needs to be able to recognise what family violence looks like. And that was a major part of that work that my colleague Paula Bennett led. And a major part of the rollout of that operations of, we know them as part of the children's team work, but a big part of that work is educating the various workforces who work with children to recognise what does abuse look like, what are the symptoms, what are the key things that you can pick up from a child's behaviour that tells you there's something going wrong in a child's life. They're not born naughty. And the number of children that have said to me, I used my behaviour to get attention about what was happening to me. And the first time that anyone took notice of that was generally when I misbehaved at school. So it's really important that our workforces understand what those behaviours are and what they are signalling. So we did introduce the children's teams, and we have 10 of them providing that joined-up wraparound support to at-risk children and their families right around the country. We're investing in programs like Family Start so that we can give that intensive home-based support to our most vulnerable families with young babes and infants. So we are intervening early and targeting the support to families whose children are at risk of poor education, poor health, and poor social outcomes. And that's absolutely vital if we're to give these kids a better start in life. And that's why in Budget 2017 we've put winkled another 28 million out of the Finance Minister. Actually, he was delighted to do it because it's a well-proven, validated program that has good effects and gives great support to families. So another 28 million to expand that nationwide. That's prevention. That is getting in early to those families. And it means that we will increase the number of Family Start places to about just over 7,000. And just as importantly as expanding it, we've increased the payment substantially to the providers to make sure that we can continue to lift the quality of the services that they provide. And just last week, we launched the new parenting resource website designed in concert with the Brainwave Trust, which brings together a wide range of parenting information to show some of our parents what good parenting looks like and the effects that it can have on our children, to support those Family Start workers who are working with those vulnerable families through the Family Start program. But actually the website's available to anyone. And I'd love to think that GPs and teachers and special ed teachers, etc., were all accessing those resources. And I found it really frustrating that on the very same day we launched that, the Ministry of Health launched their guidelines for parents, which is a great resource for parents, but the two should have been linked together. And that's just what, it's a constant battle at our end, government end, to get agencies talking about what it is that they are doing together. And then we could have produced a really fantastic resource for all parents in New Zealand. However, I move on. So, of course, we have established the new Ministry for Vulnerable Children, Oranga Tamariki. And this is the start of a 4 to 5 year transformation in how we care and protect our most vulnerable children and young people. And I won't go into that too long because I know that around the room there are a large number of people who have been involved in the development both of the review and are now involved in the development of this new ministry. But in a way, it echoes the work that we are doing for family violence, because for too long we have been responding to crises, and that's what I heard you've been talking about today. And that's where Child, Youth and Family was. It was responding to a crisis in a child's life. We need to be able to look at the cumulative life experiences that young children and young people experience, whether they're in care or in those disruptive, disconnected homes. And we need to address the trauma that those children suffer. And that's why one of the major changes in the new Oranga Tamariki system is how we deal with that trauma early on in a child's life. It's not just good enough to make sure that they're safe. We have to heal them because they have suffered trauma. And the new intervention service will work with children and their families to understand the nature of that harm and provide that intensive support. So whether we're talking about how we care for our most vulnerable children and young people, or about how we prevent and respond to family violence, I believe the solutions are much the same. We have to be ready and able to respond to families in crisis, but we also have to focus on prevention and early intervention. Providing the support that our families need means government, professionals, practitioners, organisations and volunteers all working together. Because this is critical to ensure that victims, perpetrators and their families get the support at the right time, the right support at the right time, and that nobody slips through the cracks. So achieving this is part of what we were hoping you were going to tell us a bit about today. So I'm going to be really looking at what's come out of some of those workshops, and I know Amy and I'll sit down and have a good conversation about what we've learnt from you people today, and thank you for sharing that with us. But what we do know is that it will take an integrated, consistent and effective response to family violence right across our communities. Now, I know that many of you have raised concerns about the variability in practice and understanding across the family violence and the sexual violence workforce, and the need for a consistent set of practice standards that can be used across the sector. So we are delighted today to launch the new Family Violence, Sexual Violence and Violence Within Whānau Workforce Capability Framework. It's a mouthful. They gave me a bound copy because my copy had sort of a bulldog clip holding it together. But this is a fantastic resource. It is complex, but then the workforce is large and complex. And this framework, and I know that you've been talking about it today, clearly defines the skills, knowledge and behaviours that are required so that we can all better support those who are experiencing or who are affected by perpetrating violence or perpetrating violence. And I want to thank the group that put it together, and some of them are here. I see Shane nodding his head. But it is a fantastic resource written in a language that anyone could pick up and flick through and understand. And it's an amazing piece of work that the group have done, but they've done it by working with the wider social sector to make sure that we get something that people can use and that is effective. And we also have other initiatives underway to support and increase the professionalism of our workforce. Now, social workers play a crucial role in supporting our most vulnerable families. They're on the front line across child protection, health, education and the justice sectors, and they work with a wide range of vulnerable children and adults. And they're increasingly dealing with children and adults who are highly vulnerable, who present with extremely complex issues, and who may be living in very dangerous situations. Individuals and families experiencing family violence, drug and alcohol addiction, and mental health issues require and deserve skilled and well-trained professionals to work effectively with them. In such situations, poor practice may cause harm with long-lasting effect. So we need to make sure that the people who get the expert help that they need so they don't go on to develop more serious problems. And that's why it's critical that we have a skilled and professional and respected, highly respected social workers. So I want to take this opportunity today to announce the government's plan to introduce mandatory registration for social workers. Mandatory registration will help ensure that all social workers who call themselves a social worker are well equipped to deal with our most vulnerable families and individuals, and that they're better supported to intervene early and reduce preventable harm. It means all social workers will have to meet the appropriate standards and undertake ongoing professional development as part of renewing their annual practising certificate. It will ensure consistency of practice and that all social workers are properly qualified and accountable for their practice. There will be processes in place to address any concerns about social work practice, and any social workers who have their registration cancelled will not be able to practice as a social worker again. Legislation is expected to be introduced before Parliament rises in August and will include changes to simplify the current registration processes. Now, the Social Workers Registration Board have done a lot of work on this, and I recognise Shane over there. I don't know how many ministers you've lobbied, Shane, but enough? Yeah, enough. But we're now at the point where the government has decided to proceed with this mandatory registration. And you, the registration board, and then we had an inquiry by the select committee, and I thank any of you in the room who made submissions to that, because I know a lot of the sector made submissions to it in favour of doing this. The reality is, I think we've got about 6,300 social workers registered currently, about 2,000 unregistered. We estimate about 1,200 of those are capable of being registered and will register if we have a mandatory system that gives a bit of oomph and protects the practice. And then we are aware that there are a significant number of social workers for smaller non-government agencies and in a wide variety of settings, including the health and education sectors. So we do want to make sure that the transition is as smooth as possible. So the majority of those changes will be implemented over a 2-year period. Now, these are really important changes that will ensure that those who are working with our most vulnerable New Zealanders are suitably trained and they're qualified to do so, because that protects not only our families and the vulnerable children, but it protects our social workers as well. So to everyone here, thank you very much for being part of this Family Violence Summit. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your ideas about what's working and how we can do it all better. Today is not the end of the discussion. It's the next step towards making our homes and our communities safer for everyone. And I know it often feels like, and Minister Adams and I have said, it feels like an ambitious goal to stand here and state that the cycle of family violence will end, has to end, but no matter how ambitious or difficult the goal, it's one we must set and we absolutely have to achieve. We can make a real difference to people's lives if all of us keep talking and working together. Thank you for being part of the process. Make lasting change. Encourage others to be part of it too. And Minister Adams and I will be delighted to welcome you at Parliament for perhaps warmed sausage rolls and maybe something a little stronger than orange juice. Kia ora tātou.
Goodbye. Oh. Nō reira, i ngā raurangatira, me ngā minata, ka tuku mihi mai i tēnei taha kia kōrua. Nā te kaha hei whakapakari haere i tēnei huihuinga, he mihi kia koe hoki tā wira kāna. Nō reira, kia koutou ma, he honori tēnei, kia whakakapi a tātou hui. So, to say that thanks for hosting us, thanks to Te Wira for letting us play, and now it's time for me just to close with a karakia. It's been a pleasure to meet you all. Goodbye. So, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ariki ai te kreiti. Me te atua o te kanga, e te wairua tapu, ake, harmony.
Kia ora.
Oh, bye!
When you go out, there's material at the back you can clear out. It's lovely. If you really truly believe in old people like myself,